Quite a different picture in South Africa, where it seems as if the Omicron wave may be on the way out, without the feared surge in hospitalizations and deaths. Officials say there is still reason to be cautious, but they have loosened coronavirus restrictions as case numbers drop. It was just over 6 weeks ago, November 24th, when the world's first case of Omicron was announced. Then new cases shot up, peaking at some 127,000 in the middle of December. Daily infection cases then fell by roughly a third in the week ending on Christmas Day, and they have fallen dramatically since. Just ahead of New Year's Eve, the South African government lifted the late-night curfew. Social distancing and mask mandates are still in place, though, and officials say Omicron is still a threat. On the team that first identified the Omicron variant was virologist Wolfgang Preiser from the University of Stellenbosch. Glad to have you with us, Wolfgang. We mentioned earlier no apparent surge in hospitalizations or deaths in South Africa. Can the rest of Africa, or indeed the rest of the world, breathe a bit easier now?
Very cautiously, I would say yes, but definitely the worst is still to come for most of the world. I think some of the concerns that we had early on when we first discovered Omicron as a new variant, they have come true. And one of them is that it is incredibly contagious. So it spreads very fast and furiously. And that is reflected in the very rapid and steep increase of case numbers that we observed here. And we also went to unprecedented heights. And looking at South African figures, and the same is true for many other countries, they only reflect a proportion of positives. We think that we only diagnose about 1/10 of the cases that are out there in the community. So it's really a dizzying number that we reached in no time. But when we then held our breath and prepared for the worst in terms of hospital admissions, we were sort of disappointed in a positive way. We didn't see the ensuing increase in desperately ill people. We still get them. I mean, I have to stress that there are still people being ventilated because of COVID and being admitted to ICU, and people are dying from it. But in terms of the proportion of infections, it's far less than we've seen previously.
Can you put a number to that? How less dangerous? How much less dangerous it is?
Yeah, that is a difficult question. There are two basic factors. One would be, is this virus in itself, this variant, less dangerous than the previous ones? Does it have a decreased virulence, as we call it? That basically means its capacity to make people seriously ill. And I think we are now getting to a point where increasingly we can say, yes, that is true. There were hopes, but now with data coming out of lab experiments in cell cultures, in laboratory animals, but also observational studies, I think it is true that in itself, this virus is of a somewhat lesser virulence than the previous one. But that is not an all or nothing. So I'm not talking of a common cold virus. It's still a virus that can make you seriously ill and kill you. But the chances of that happening are diminished by probably about 30%. But what really made the difference here in South Africa is that the vast majority of the population have some degree of underlying immunity, which is obviously not enough to keep off infection and doesn't prevent one from also becoming infectious, but it helps in developing severe disease. And
you mentioned there, let me just briefly interrupt you there. You mentioned there that there are specific reasons for this playing out like it did in South Africa. The WHO says South Africa is an outlier because of its young population and other factors. Is that something that you would agree on briefly, if you can, please?
Absolutely, yeah. No, demographics are very different from here and industrialized countries. So clearly they have far more older people and people with underlying conditions that increase their risk. And I would say that what we've observed in terms of the virus's ability to spread, all of these people are at high risk right now. But what saved us is the underlying immunity, and in most cases, actually, it comes from having had COVID previously in South Africa, which is obviously not a desirable thing because many people died from it. So I would just like to underline the need for everybody to get vaccinated and, if eligible, to also get the booster shots, because this is the best strategy to, even if one gets infected, and I think the risk is very high, of avoiding severe disease.
Wolfgang Preiser there, Head of Medical Virology at South Africa's University of Stellenbosch. Thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.